It's the Brad and John Show.
And it is the Brad and John Show for Thursday. So happy it's Thursday. S-H-I something or other. So happy it's Thursday, and this is...
I never heard that before,
You never heard that before?
Are you serious? I've never heard that.
So happy it's Thursday? You never heard that before?
Yeah, that's so funny.
You can do the same thing for Tuesday as well, too. So happy it's Tuesday. Okay. This is... it's... what did I get the date? It's April 10th. This is B Block. Okay, John... You know, pardon me if I do something which is not according to the radio handbook of the proper way to do things. But you said something. Hold on a minute. 883. Okay, you said something, and I just have to do something.
You got to call somebody very special to us.
I have to call somebody because I don't know if she's going to answer or not. Shelley, come on, Shelley, answer the phone. Because there's a funny story about Shelley and Sweet Meat the Pig. Okay, and I only want to get it from the...
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message.
She's not going to pick up. Okay, maybe we'll call her later. Okay, John, I have to ask you, you're Mr. Stock Market guy. Yesterday, another record was set. We have, 3 days of down in the toilet activity in the stock market. And yesterday, the stock market closed, Dow Jones up almost 3,000 points. Wasn't like 29 and change or something?
Incredible, yeah.
Okay, what's your read on this?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly what it is. So first of all, I'm not the stock market guy. I just kind of pay a little bit of attention here and there and try to rub some nickels and dimes together so I can retire someday. I know how you feel about retirement, Brad. So if you go back to Monday and the conversation we had Monday about the market volatility, or I should say the conversation we had Tuesday, because Jim Cramer over the weekend, famous CNBC host and investment quote-unquote guru, predicted a stock market Black Monday, a terrible day on Monday. We didn't have that. And then we've had some horrific drawdowns, some horrific down days. And Brad, on our show on Tuesday, we talked about, I gave kind of a primer on what market volatility is, and why buy the dip is a bad idea, and why freaking out is a bad idea. And I think a lot of people we saw sold a lot of their assets on Tuesday. And they read headlines. We call them, in the hedge eye community, we call them macro tourists. So, Brad, if you turned on your TV in the last couple of weeks and you saw the market was down, you thought, God, I gotta sell everything. I got to put it in cash, maybe even short some stocks. And Trump announced that he was going to, what he did on tariffs and the idea of 90-day pause on tariffs except for China. I guess the short of it, Brad, is that if you tried to short the market or you sold all your stuff because you believed news headlines and that the market was crashing, you got your face ripped off yesterday. So anecdotally, Brad, I logged in. I generally, this is probably a little too much detail, but I generally don't trade until I trade the close. So I'll log in usually around 235, 245 and just kind of trade the close and settle up some positions and such. And I couldn't believe my account, frankly, when, I looked at the percentage number and was like, what the heck happened? And then I saw the headlines about trade. So it just goes to show, Brad, what I mentioned specifically on Tuesday is that in bear markets, you have bear market bounces. And when you have high volatility, I said verbatim, your moves high, your bounces are high, and your drawdowns are low. So that's the definition of volatility. So nobody who follows, for example, hedge eye risk management should be surprised to see a 10% move up like we saw yesterday. It's a volatile market, Brad. So that's my analysis of what happened yesterday. And I think the other thing that I would just point out to people, Brad, that people can actually use for their own retirement account as they're listening to this, if you have bad positions that you have been freaked out about, this is an opportunity after a 10% move up in the market to clean up your portfolio. If you feel bad about investments you've made and you're getting all emotional, this is the time to go in there and clean it up.
But see, here we go. I don't want to say once
again.
Here
we go again, Brad.
Here we go again. Okay. The true investors, how many guys do I listen to, the Del Walmsley of the world, who brag about how much money they made back in 2008, 2009, 2010? Because everybody was freaking out. They were selling their house. Oh, they were using Suze Orman, oh, God.
And tell the Suze Orman story about taking your keys and dropping them on a desk, Brad.
Suze Orman was on the Oprah show one day and keep in mind, this is when the real estate values were in the toilet and a lot of people were not doing well. And quite honestly, some people were being foreclosed on. But her position was, and I'll just use round numbers. You bought a $200,000 house and you put 20% down, which means you had a mortgage of $160,000, okay? And all of a sudden, the real estate values crash in your area, and your price appraisal in your house goes to $140,000. She said, go to the bank and drop your keys on the banker's desk and say, it's your house now, because you're now $20,000 underwater. And I say, she's the reason why the whole situation cratered, because people did that. And they walked into their bank, or they just didn't walk into the bank. They just say, I'm not making any more payments. And they moved out of their house and they lost their house. They got foreclosed on. Well, once again, that was 2008. Let's say if that house was in California and it was worth $200,000 which $200,000 in most places, California is like a shack, but it was worth $200,000 in 2008. The house is probably worth what? $600,000 now, John? Million?
Yeah, at least. I'm not a real estate expert, but yeah, at least.
Ton of money. Okay, ton of money. And the idea being is that the stupid people, and I hate to say that, but just like what you're saying, the stupid people freak out and sell, oh my God, the stock market's down 10%, I'm getting out. And then it goes up 10%, and they're out, right? And
yeah. And so the other thing that I would say here, too, is that if you were an eternal optimist, you would say the good news about stuff like this is that when you have such high volatility and it captures the headlines for a week, that encourages people that don't pay attention to their money to log in or to call their friendly financial advisor at Edward Jones and say, hey, is it time? Do we need to look at my portfolio? But so that's an optimist view. But the sad thing is, Brad, people that don't pay attention to people that do have investments or retirement accounts that don't pay attention to it, they'll see the market crash. They'll see a 10% move up and think, okay, we're off the hook on that one. I'll worry about my retirement money some other day.
Well, John, you want Brad's advice? Here's Brad's advice.
I do, yeah.
Brad's advice is just forget about retiring and you won't worry about this kind of stuff.
There you go. That is Brad. That is, and you know, Brad, to all jokes aside, that's not unrelated to this point, which is if you are so stressed out about your retirement account or you're nervous about it, then you should be de-risking, or you choose to just not follow and bounce around the headlines every day. I make the conscious decision to pay attention to markets 5 days a week, to invest time listening to what the volatility is in this particular sector every day. I choose to take on that stress in my life. But if it bothers you, then don't do it.
Well, see, don't get me going again on this, is the whole thing that I've had people say to me, and I will tell something I shouldn't say on the air. I've had several people say to me, oh my God, my 401k is in terrible shape. And I said to them, no change in my 401k. And they went like, how's that possible? I said, I don't have one. And they went, what? You don't have a 401k?
But Brad, your situation, as you mentioned last week, your situation is different because you are all in the radio industry. So you haven't set aside a parachute to say, okay, if this doesn't work by the time I'm 70 years old, I'm going to go live on a boat in Pensacola and not worry about the radio industry. Your assets are tied up in the radio industry.
No, if this doesn't work, I'll just work the sign at 170 and Page or 70 and 94, and I'll walk away with $300, $400, $500 a day, and I'll just go, look at me.
Yeah, and you know what, Brad? For folks who I know that there's a lot of new listeners that haven't heard this story. You once claimed it was your birthday, and you booted a poor homeless man out of his usual spot.
It was my birthday. I made up a sign and I went on a spot and because of the fact that my birthday is the day after a holiday, which is I won't give that away. Okay,
now,
anyway.
it's your kayfabe birthday. It's not your real birthday, right? Because you have 2 birthdays.
I have 2 birthdays. Okay, so I printed up a sign, a big sign, 18 by 24. And matter of fact, it's interesting because I don't know if you know this or not. There's part of the story I didn't tell you. As I standing on this exit ramp, a guy pulled up and he says, "Hey man, yard signs rock." And I looked at the guy and I thought to myself, "Oh, that's Tom Smith." That's no, anyway. So I printed up a sign. I said, "It's my birthday. Help me celebrate with some cash." So I got there and there was nobody working the sign at that area. And about half an hour after I was there, a guy showed up and got into a verbal skirmish with me because of the fact that he told me that I was dressed nicely, which I wasn't. I was dressed in my usual stuff I wear all the time. And I was dressed nicely, and I didn't really need the money. And he also made a comment to me because I was white, and I'd never told that part of the story before. So I get into a conversation with him, and I say, "You don't know anything about me." I said, "I own businesses. My businesses aren't doing so well. My net worth is probably less than yours." And he looked at me, he goes, "Well, I'm out here." And I go, "No, tell me." He says, "Because I'm dodging child support." He admitted to me.
Yeah, good for him. That's a good father right there.
I told him, I said, "You can go over to that restaurant that's having help one inside." He says, "No, I can't do that because they'll garnish my pay and they'll take out my child support." I'm going like, is this a model citizen or what? He's dodging paying for his child support by not becoming employed, instead by working for cash. So as we're standing there having this argument, I still have my sign. I'm holding my sign, and a guy pulls up right next to me and he says, "Hey, dude, happy birthday." And he hands me a $1 bill. And I went, yes! It was the best day of my life.
And you actually took a video of that, didn't you?
Oh, I put it on my Facebook page because people didn't believe it. Now, the other interesting part was, as I left, I gave the other guy $5. So I lost $4 on the deal. I made $1 and I gave the other dude $5. Now, the crazy thing about it is, just the other day in this same location, when it was about 40 degrees, there's a guy out there, no sign. He's asking for money with no shirt on. Now, John, think about that for a minute. That's like, I think to myself, is that the guy from the city? Remember the crazy story that when Kevin Killeen was still working at Camo X? Did I ever tell this story on the air?
No, I don't think so. You're not talking about Baton Bob, are you?
No, there was a guy who every single day was down like on Market, right across the street from City Hall, and he was panhandling, and he never had a shirt on. Even if it was like 20 degrees, he never had a shirt on.
Oh, wow.
So one day, people kept telling Kevin Killeen, because the Camo X studios are like 2 blocks from there, and they say, "Kevin, why don't you go on an interview with that guy? Find out what the hell his deal is." So Kevin goes over there with his typical low-key interviewing style, and he talks to the guy and the whole bit, and he asking him what he's doing. "Hey, so I'm trying to make money." And Kevin says to him, "What do you do with the money you make?" And he points to the Firefighters Memorial. You know where the Firefighters Memorial is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, he points to the Firefighters Memorial and he says, "Well, after I make enough money, I go over there and I buy drugs from that guy." I'm going like,
yeah, I was just going to, for a minute, I thought you were going to say that he donates it to, they have a cash box out there. Yeah, but that's pretty much an open air drug market, right?
Right across from City Hall. I mean, literally, you can walk. I don't know if there's a side entrance to City Hall. The main entrance to City Hall is on Tucker. But if there is a side entrance to City Hall on Market, you could walk out that side door, walk maybe 150 steps? Would that be about right, John?
I think it's right there. Yeah.
Probably 150 steps. And there's a drug market right there that everybody knows about. Now, once again, I'm sorry I said that again. That's the problem with the city. I mean, if everybody knows, if you go to the Firefighters Memorial, what do they call that? Is that a name for that park? That's not Keener Plaza.
I'm not sure. I think it's heroin. I think it's Fentanyl Park.
Yeah, Fentanyl Park.
I think it's Fentanyl Park.
It's right between, it's sort of sad because it's right between the City Hall and the Soldiers Memorial, because the Soldiers Memorial is on the north side and City Hall's on the south side. And once again, everybody knows that's the drug market. And this guy is so unabashed. Now, maybe he's so stoned out of his mind that he doesn't realize he's talking to a radio reporter and Kevin goes back and chops the interview back up and puts it on the air. And everybody who listens to it, I'm thinking to myself, God, this is so sad. This is the city of St. Louis.
And let me interrupt, Brad. I have a link up today. I thought there was a interesting interview on 97.1 yesterday. I think it was on Mark Cox's show. And I linked to it today. Yeah, it was on Mark Cox. And Mark had Representative David Casteel from High Ridge on. And David was talking about creating essentially a safety, let's see what the name of it is, like a sports and entertainment district downtown. Did you happen to catch any of this?
I did not.
Okay, so real quickly, he talks about creating, he calls it the St. Louis Sports District. And the idea is that you would have your favorite word, Brad, stakeholders voluntarily contribute for a certain size set of blocks. I think disgustingly, it goes up to MLK on the north. It goes west to Jefferson and then down to Spruce. And the idea is that stakeholders would contribute money to have old-fashioned secondary cops on the beat, like in the old-timey days when you had cops on the beat. And Casteel's point is, let's set it up for a few years. Let's see if companies contribute to it, like the Cardinals. He didn't name the Cardinals, but like big employers downtown. And we give people a sense of security. And then come 26 or 27, the state will chip in $2.5 million to continue funding the program. So I would say that Mark Cox seemed, I don't know. I read the transcript. I didn't listen to it. I think there's a lot of people that are skeptical of Missouri taxpayers dumping more money into St. Louis City. But I keep calling him Chip Casteel. But David's point is that, okay, let's get some cops walking the beat so people feel safe parking by Busch Stadium and walking in.
What's sad about this is, and maybe Kara Spencer will change things sometimes. By the way, I didn't talk about this. I heard an interview with her. Matter of fact, in C Block, let's talk about this. I heard an interview with her on early Sunday morning. I was out and about, because I get up early every morning. And that's when everybody runs their public affairs programming. And she was on one of the iHeart stations. And I'll tell you the interview with the interviewer in C Block. But the sad part of that is that's just, common sense 101. It's to the point where if all of a sudden, let's say there was a rent, and to the point where, the other thing I wanted to mention was, you're already having citizens in some area of the city of St. Louis, I believe like in the South City area, Holly Hills area, who are already buying extra police protection. You know what I'm talking about? They're hiring.
Yeah, I do know.
They're hiring security services or police on, what do they call it? You said second, what is it? Second?
Yeah, working secondary.
Working secondary. Okay, they're working secondary. Okay. It's to the point where if there was some company that popped up overnight and it's like, rent a police force. Hey, rent a police force. We'll send you a police officer $500 a day, okay? And you just go online, you say, okay, I'll take 100 of them. And you rent like 100 police officers and say, okay, here's your corner. You're on Market and Olive, okay? Here's your corner. You're on Market and Spruce, okay? And you just put a police officer and you have them go in like full body armor with a helmet and an M4, and you just put them there and they just stand there, and like every block has a police officer. Don't you think the crime statistics in that area would like plummet overnight to the point where they'd
excuse me, I think so. And one of Mark Cox's points to Casteel was, hey, this sounds so simple. I can't believe nobody's proposed it.
Right. I mean, it's to the point where it's like, and yet you hear Jane Duker tell the stories about, I told you the thing that so impactful when Jane Duker ran down. Well, the worst part of the story is, and she goes through the whole thing, there's only 1,000 police officers left in the St. Louis Police Department, and 200 of them are on administrative leave because they're injured, and another 100 of them are getting ready to retire, and another 100 of them have desk jobs, which leaves 400 police officers on the street in St. Louis. You go like, that's not good.
20 of them are dedicated to answering Brad Hildebrand's 911 call.
Right. You go like, that's not good. There's nobody left on the streets anymore. Okay, we have to take a break.